right. Thanks for the introduction. I would like first to say that in Italy we don't do that anymore. So we don't kill people like randomly like you've seen before. We do some other stuff, and today I'm going to talk about something that is going on in these years, I would say. So as you can see, there are two main topics in the title of my presentation, and I believe both of them could be interesting for you as a citizen of your countries or for guests of Switzerland. I guess most of you are actually not Swiss, I would say. So we will talk about direct democracy first, and about the Five Stars movement. That is something pretty Italian. So first of all, what is direct democracy? If we go back to literature, we will see that it is a form of democracy in which people decide about policy initiatives directly. And the opposite is what we call representative democracy, which is probably most common, in which people vote for some representative, and then these people will decide about the political issues of the country. So direct democracy is a very ancient concept. We had some examples in Athens, in the Roman Republic in the 5th century before Christ. Both of them ended up in tyranny, we could say, so not a very lucky situation. Nowadays, there are no real examples about direct democracy. There are 5 reasons that I collected, and I believe these are quite representative. So the first reason is feasibility. Imagine to collect all the people of a country and decide about something every time, collect everybody, and get decision done like that. You would expect a lot of delays in the process of decision making. Imagine to upscale what is happening in your parliament, in the parliament of your countries. If I see what is happening in the Italian parliament and I upscale it, that's probably civil war. So it's not something that you would love for your country. Then this is comic to say, but representative democracy and the existence of political parties actually mitigate the influence of what we can call the hidden powers. You can think about the mafia, you can think about the masonry. So there is some kind of mitigation in having some representative. Fifth, and I think this is the main reason, is that direct democracy can be the best to represent the majority, what is the will of a majority, but doesn't represent at all the minorities that are in a country. And we may think about how many minorities are even in Switzerland. So representative democracy takes into account this problem, and that's why it has been chosen in most of the constitution of the states in Europe and also in the United States. The best example of direct democracy that we can think about is obviously Switzerland. Switzerland is defined, if you go in Wikipedia, you will see that it is a multi-party federal directorial democratic republic. What does it mean? It means that you have tools of direct democracy, but at the same time you have a representative democracy. So just briefly, there are 26 cantons, 4 official language, 8 million people. There is a parliament that is composed of 2 houses. And there is an executive part of the power that is these famous 7 members with equal rights. What is peculiar, where is the direct democracy? The direct democracy is in the fact that Swiss people actually go to vote every 3-4 months. And these statistics that I took from the Swiss website, so there is the Federal Republic of Switzerland website. It's actually true for the last 150 years. So from the beginning of what is the nowadays Switzerland, 1848, if I well remember. So what are the tools of Swiss direct democracy? We may think about the fact that people are obliged, requested to vote for any urgent decision, for any amendments to the constitution, and for any decision about entering a supranational organization. As you can see on the right, I think that's about the NATO. There is the option for people to have to call for a referendum, what is called optional referendum for any kind of amendments to the federal laws, even for the cantonal laws, as far as I remember, and to oppose to a law that was passed by the parliament, this in a frame of, in a time range of 100 days after the publication. And there is what I think is mostly peculiar of Switzerland and almost unique, is what is called popular initiative. You may have recalled this name lately. Popular initiatives means that if I collect 100,000 signatures or the request of 8 cantons, which is more or less 2.5% of the people that have the right to vote in Switzerland, you can propose something. You can not only refuse something, but propose a law, propose a modification to the law, to the federal law and to the constitutional law. And if you reach the double majority, this law gets into the parliament and gets discussed into the parliament. Actually, they have the obligation to discuss whatever is decided by the popular initiative. So I think 10% of the popular initiatives actually got success in the last 150 years. This is more or less the statistic. But what is coming out is a better interaction between the political parties and the people of Switzerland. If you see the statistics, you may see that it seems like people are more satisfied about their politicians here in Switzerland, more than in Italy for sure, and that the political parties are actually more responsible. That's what the statistics say, what the papers say. So this kind of interaction is more or less the motivation that started everything for the 5-star movement, the other topic of my talk. If you remember, the last 20 years of Italian politics were dominated by somebody that was not really famous for his political skills, but for something else. So the effect is that in 2011, the 5 main parties of Italy were not really representing the people, I would say, and they were mainly mistrusted by the people. This is the background. So what happened is that a very famous comedian in Italy, which is this guy, Beppe Grillo, started to collect a series of ideas about reforming, revolutionize the Italian politics, and even the society of Italy. So he started saying that everything is corrupted. He was right. So we need a change, a big change in Italy. What happened is that he built up a system and a series of ideas that were collected into a blog. This blog is very famous in Italy, and it's actually one of the most famous blogs even in Europe and in the world. And around this blog, a series of local organizations started to rise. It became a national phenomenon, and then it was institutionalized in a kind of political party, even if they don't want to be called political party, but it's a movement, a 5-star movement. And you could see the 5 stars down there that are, I never remember them, but I think they are water, environment, connectivity, transport, development, I think. These are the 5 stars. This is the meaning of the 5 stars. So basically what they want to do, what they propose is a revolution in the social and political life of Italy. Just to cut it short, we have the results, the political election gave a lot of, let's say, success to this party or to this movement. We may see kind of linear, even exponential growth of the preferences of the people. Last year, they became the first party in Italy. Actually, 25% of the people voted for them. So what is the secret of this success? I may say that probably the best thing that is not only the topics that were discussed, but is the full idea that is actually quite interesting. Imagine that you have a network that is fully accessible by people, and they collect ideas and set some kind of rules for a political party, inform the people about what is happening around locally and nationally, and provide the tools to get decisions that can go to the parliament, and then, provide tools to elect the candidates, your candidates that go to the parliament. So at the center there is this kind of platform. You may imagine, I have a friend of mine that gave me this idea. You may imagine that it's like a computer. You have hardware where that is owned by somebody, this guy that you've seen before, and you have a software that is like open source. You can get access to the code, you can control it, you can improve it. This is more or less the best idea that I got about the full movement, the full platform that is behind that. Is it direct democracy? I may think about that. I think it's a very nice concept in terms of approaching the direct democracy. There is one thing, if you think about the way the candidates are elected, this is some kind of example of how directly the democracy works for this party. Candidates are required to accept the rules of the movement, and these are actually the words of the constitution of the movement. They are the terminal and executor of the electoral body. So they are spokesmen. They are just there to represent what the people decided. They cannot take decision by themselves, in theory. The people, they have to inform themselves through the network, through the platform, through internet, to the local media, whatever it is. And then they vote for any decision that is taken, and these decisions are then passed to the spokesman, to the representative of the country. They have even the access to the records of the representative, and they can even fire the representative whenever they are not represented well. In the middle, there is this kind of figure that is basically guaranteeing that everything is working fine. That's what his role is. And that the guarantee is that everybody is worth one. So the candidates and the people are worth the same. If we think about that, we may think about a more general movement that is going on in Europe, which is called digital direct democracy. Digital direct democracy was proposed by the pirate parties in Sweden. In Germany, they had some success in 2011, if I well remember. In Iceland, there is, after the default of 2011, there is this kind of open platforms where people can go there and decide something about the constitution. So it's like full interaction between the people and the parliament to reform the constitution of Iceland. Now, the questions that are coming out at the end of this talk is the motivation of my talk. I would like to discuss with you about the fact if direct democracy is really, it can be scaled and it can be possible in the modern countries, and is it really true that each one of us is really worth one for every decision? With that, I thank you for the occasion and for the attention. Thanks. Yes.
Thanks for the presentation. One question. I had the impression that after their successes in the national elections in Italy, the representative parliament were kind of trapped by that success. So if I remember correctly, they rejected to vote on a series of kind of laws that had been necessary for at that point, or that were actually vital to keep the country going. Also in connection with the whole financial crisis in Italy, and they just rejected to vote for that on the basis that they said, look, we are completely out of this establishment. So they were at least running the risk of actually being detrimental to the country and to the country's well-being, just because they were against anything that had to do with the establishment, even if it made sense, even if they actually could stand behind it. They were just saying, look, this is the parliament, and we don't want to have anything to do with it.
So, as far as I know, as far as I can answer, I would say the motivation is right. I mean, the motivation, this is what really happened. They said, all the people around us are corrupted. We don't want to have anything to do with this political class. What you said about the laws, they were not opposing to every law. They were mainly opposing to those laws. They were mainly not giving any kind of idea of sharing some kind of decision with the other parties. What was happening is that they declared that they would have voted any kind of laws that for them was actually correct. So there is not like this total opposition. It's more about the topics, right? So if the topics is fair and correct for them, they would have voted that. I think that happened as well. There is still this thing that the main motivation is that started everything is that they don't want to be a political party. They call themselves a movement because political parties are synonym of corruption in Italy, which is fairly true, I would say.
So how does certain laws of the movement fit into the political system? Like, for example, this firing of representative, that's impossible in the parliament. When someone is elected, is already elected, you can't exchange that. He can change affiliation if he wants, you know, you can't just remove him.
It's actually the problem that came out in the last, I guess, year in Italy. So there were a kind of a significant percentage of people that actually moved out from the party. So they were representative of, for different reasons. So I don't want to talk about the reasons. But they basically, in the Italian parliament, you can decide to step out the party and become part of what is called the mixed group of the parliament. So you're still a representative of whoever elected you.
Yeah. That's,
but
I think it's in most of the parliament.
I think it's everywhere. It's probably everywhere like that. Again, there is a big discussion about that because you may think about this kind of system of controlling the representative as some kind of a threat for them, I would say. So if they don't stay at the rules of the party, they are out. That's some kind of very, it's a kind of trouble situation, I would say.
Thanks. I would have tons of comments, but I think this is something for further discussion. As I'm an SIMA political scientist, but maybe one question. So what is your hypothesis on what makes direct democracy work? Also think about in terms of the existing institutions, the existing political institutions. So do you have any hypothesis that
You want to get my opinion about these questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's problematic. That's why I actually wanted to discuss with you. But so my opinion is, is direct democracy possible in the modern countries at the moment? No. There is no. I guess the main answer is the other one. Is one worth one? For me, it's not true. So it may sound very, very strange and very bad, but think about that. I was discussing about that with the friend that gave me the example of the computer. If you have to decide something about making a bread, and you are a scientist like me, is your decision as much worthy as the one of somebody that does that as a professional? For me, the answer is no, right? And that is an example to say that direct democracy should be, in my opinion, should be always mitigated by some kind of other level of control and some kind of other level of, let's say, decision. There was this guy that I talked to prepare this presentation is one of the activists of the 5-star movement, and he was saying another thing that made me actually think about at the moment you have two options of decision in the platform. You can decide either to vote for something or to vote against something. There should be a third way to decide. There should be I don't have any clue about that. That would be already a good improvement in the situation.
It's your right to be non-informed.
Exactly.
Ignorant, if you like. That's also one of our.
I still wonder how Switzerland works because to me it sounds.
That's directly what is what I say. If you have the right and the power to vote, you also have to be sure that you know what are the consequences of the vote. And as consequences of the entire consequences of their vote. I think we have a problem with getting a direct democracy in modern countries too big. I think if you are in a small scale, I think Switzerland can work with it quite well, but let's see. But it's not always working in a perfect way. But sometimes if you're affecting foreign affairs, I think then it's becoming complicated. And somebody who can't see really all the consequences, I think it's really, really difficult. Therefore, I would argue that it might be not so easy.
I think for us in Switzerland it works quite well because we think that the state is beneficial for us. We see the state as being us, that's at least what the Switzerland client said. Whereas outside in other countries, they think the state is their enemy, it's taking away their money. So they only would vote in benefit for themselves, like lowering taxes or having more holidays. Whereas we think, okay, if we have more holidays, we work less, we get less money, so we can actually vote against it. That's the main difference.
There is a couple of publications that I collected that were saying exactly that the main consequence of direct democracy in Switzerland, or of these tools of direct democracy, is the psychological aspect. So there is a big difference of what a Swiss person thinks and what we think of.
I don't think it's a thing about culture, it's really about the institution that you have in place. Switzerland is a conversational democracy, right? So you have many veto points, which means that it's the minorities that will fight for their rights through direct democracy. So it's actually a protection mechanism that the state does not superimpose its own or its majority opinion. Whereas, for example, in California, which is a strongly majoritarian system, right? So if you get 50 plus X, you get it all, basically. Then, of course, this direct democracy is used as a tool to shun the minority and to outvote it, right? So it's a really question about checks and balances, veto rights. And so I would strongly think that there is an interaction between formal political institutions and elements of direct democracy that could make it work, right? If you have a system of checks and balances.
Do you know more or less how many people are living in California?
27 million, of course, but that might only be
Way more or 50?
now 50. Well,
But we are now in the new age.
And to become the Mexicans.
exactly, or the immigrants. But I think it's not a question of size. I mean, everything can be organized. It's just how do you say, a third, like a confounding factor that
I also think it
might lead to
could
the conclusion.
work even at bigger sizes.
So let's take the last question and then.
Okay, I just wanted to get back to your question actually. So you said like kind of work in modern countries, and one thing that I think has not been said is really that it totally depends on the level and on the problem. I mean, you said that of course baking a bread requires expertise in bakery, but I think even just there are a couple of problems, like as it is organized in Switzerland, that you just don't vote on. So you agree to, like, they're restricted. Okay, this is something which we cannot simply topple over by majority vote in the by referendum. But there's also a couple of problems, and I think this can be very specific problems where it makes total sense. In a way, this recent popular initiative, also on immigration, that's a type of problem that can make sense to solve in a direct popular vote. On the other hand, if you talk about levels, like at the communal or at the regional level, there's so many specific problems. I think the further down you go, the more problems you have that you can very easily, and I mean it's also done in a lot of European countries, and it doesn't concern the whole country, you can solve. Like, do we want to plant trees here, or do we not want to do it? And I think that happens, and it's perfectly possible, right?
In a very small community.
Well, it depends on how small. I mean, it can be like a city, it can be a town, it can be a village, it can also be like a whole state or canton. So it's just that complete countries is a different story.
But sorry, just because this starts from the assumption that a politician is like this wise person that knows everything. I think we're still stuck with something that is not anymore the digital era. So most of us are doing a PhD, so you know that the first year you don't know anything. The second year you